Okay, I think I'm going to talk a little bit about the Mueller report today. A little disheveled, as you can see. Uh, but I just want to analyze the media reaction to the Mueller report, which sort of fits into a pattern of them continually misrepresenting virtually everything that's occurred in this I don't know what to call it, but it's been described as an internal coup d'état. Basically, in the intelligence agencies, the political class, both Democrat and Republican, because Senator McCain, the late Senator McCain, as you might know, was the one that was responsible for disseminating the Steele report. So, in a very direct way, Senator McCain is the one responsible for this 2-year long fiasco, which was predicated on the idea that Donald Trump should not be allowed to perform his duties in office, despite the fact that he was elected by the American people, that he was inaugurated and sworn in as president of the United States and sworn to faithfully uphold the laws of the United States and the Constitution. The entire premise behind the Mueller investigation was to thwart the electoral results of 2016. Now, the media can twist and manipulate and try to spin this into something else, but that's the long and short of it. The political class did not want Donald Trump to be president because they perceived him as some sort of disruptive force. They didn't like the rhetorical jabs he threw at them. They didn't like the very very factual and accurate assessment of the Iraq war boondoggle and all of the other military interventions that have been catastrophic, both for the countries that are on the receiving end and in the long run for the United States. So the investigation into a trumped-up, made-up charge that was completely discredited, and I think people need to understand that excuse me. People need to understand that there's no there was no underlying basis for the Mueller investigation. It was predicated on the Steele report, which is a complete and utter fabrication, was a hoax. Basically, there was no legal justification for them to pursue a FISA warrant, which is why they were rejected the first 2 times they came to a FISA court. Now, for those who aren't familiar with FISA courts, these are internal courts, secret courts that basically issue basically grant federal investigative agencies the right to pursue domestic intelligence and people living here who they assert have some sort of illicit or illegal relationship with foreign entities. And since there was no tangible evidence that Trump had any relationship with Russian authorities or Russian nationals or his campaign or anyone in his campaign, the first 2 times they approached this court, they were rejected. And the thing is, FISA courts, it's like a rubber stamp when people go to these judges and ask them for the ability to initiate an investigation. 95% plus of these applications are approved, and this was rejected twice. So in other words, they approached rubber stamp courts to grant them leeway to investigate Donald Trump, and they were rejected twice. So they had to cobble together a cause for the investigation, namely the Steele dossier, which has been completely and utterly discredited. And I was at a speech by Anthony Scaramucci, which was a very entertaining speech. He's an interesting figure. But he responded to a question in the audience. Someone asked him about Donald Trump's comments about John McCain, and he said, "Well, I don't know any religion that tells you to speak negatively about the dead." But he wasn't speaking negatively about the dead. He was speaking accurately about the dead. John McCain is, in large measure, responsible for this 2-year farce. The idea that he should be above criticism because he's deceased, that we shouldn't criticize someone who, putting this aside for a second, who was responsible for things like the Libya debacle. There are slaves being traded there are slave markets in Tripoli, and Europe was flooded with invaders from Islamic countries who are now wreaking havoc across the continent. Libya is still in turmoil, and it's still, and I'll speak about this in another video. General Haftar is trying to reassert some sort of order in Libya, and he's still being thwarted by Islamists. And these Islamists were empowered by people like John McCain. So you add to that the fact that he initiated a tangible campaign, a covert campaign to unseat a duly elected president. And the idea that you shouldn't criticize this person because he's deceased is ridiculous. I mean, if that were the barometer for ethics or morality, we wouldn't be able to criticize Adolf Hitler or Joseph Stalin or Mao Zedong. If someone has done terrible things and is responsible for turmoil and chaos and misery, and is responsible for the misery of many, many people, you should be able to criticize them regardless of whether they are alive or, in Senator John McCain's case, deceased. It's hard to even contemplate what would have happened, say, in the Kavanaugh hearings if John McCain were still alive. He was responsible for thwarting a repeal of Obamacare. There are just a lot of things that he's worthy of criticism. And I'm not saying we should defame him, but reporting on his character and his beliefs and trying to analyze some of the lasting negative impact of his 30-odd years in the Senate and in Congress, that's not speaking ill of the dead. It's speaking accurately of someone who had a very negative impact, not only on domestic politics and foreign policy, but just on our Constitution. He essentially tried to repeal the First Amendment's protections for freedom of speech and freedom of association. So that's my anti-McCain tangent. But my point is, this investigation should have never happened, and the reaction of the media, just like the reaction of the media whenever they're exposed as liars and manipulators, is to cast blame on their victims. In this case, the people in the Trump administration that they defamed. They've still, forget about apologizing to Donald Trump. They haven't apologized to Carter Page, who they smeared as a Russian asset. They haven't apologized to Roger Stone. They haven't apologized to any Donald Trump Jr. They haven't apologized to anyone whose integrity they impugned and who we now know are innocent. They're hanging their hat on the fact that Robert Mueller put a little poison pill in the report saying the president wasn't exonerated. Well, that's not a prosecutor's job to exonerate someone. When you don't charge someone, that means you cannot make a case that they're guilty. We don't live in Minority Report where you're presumed guilty. And listening to the media's listening to the media's pathetic attempts to justify their lies and their just repeated incompetence and malfeasance is remarkable. NPR is a perfect example today. They used the Mueller report to claim that they had been right all along, that Trump was obstructing justice. They didn't mention the fact that there was nothing to obstruct. The underlying crime was not there. Therefore, you cannot obstruct something that does not exist. And the idea that this vindicates the media, which is what NPR was running with today, and other outlets, the Washington Post, who's one of the leaders in the stealth coup, or not so stealth coup, is just astounding. But it's not surprising to people. This is why people should cheer the media, the mainstream media's death throes, the fact that newspapers are dying and that no one trusts the media. This should be an encouragement to everyone. But the fact is they still have way too much power, as the aftermath of this attempted coup illustrates.